You may be seated there where you are, and as you're being seated, I want to invite you to reach and grab your copy of God's Word there that you brought with you, or perhaps one that is in one of the chairs there in your aisle, or on your smart device, and go to Luke chapter 16. If you're new with us here today, we have been in the middle of a series at Cottonwood for the last few weeks entitled Renewed, where we looked at 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17. Where the Apostle Paul says, for those who are in Christ, who are believers and followers of Christ, the old has passed away. Behold, all things have become brand new. And so we titled this series Renewed, as we look at God's Word and we gain insight and wisdom on how we should let the most important areas of our life be renewed because of our walk with Christ. Today, we come to an important topic that we all need to hear, and we talk about each one of these sessions, these lessons, we have had a new something. Today we're going to talk about new generosity. Really learning to live in a way that we honor God with our money, and as such, we honor God with how we utilize and use our money. There are times that people will, when they hear, oh no, the pastor's talking about money, I want you to know, I want to invite you just to back up for a second. And don't think, oh no, what's he going to say? Is he going to get on us because we don't give enough or tithe enough? That's not it. And I want you to know that that there are some people who are fearful of talking about money, and that's not where I am either. And here's the reason why. Because as a follower of Christ, and for those who are here, if you are not even yet a follower of Christ, you're just kind of looking in, easing in, I want you to know this message is for you as well. Because when we get the area of money in our lives to a place where we are managing our money and our money isn't managing us, we will all be better off. Do you understand what I'm talking about? I will tell you, and you can read the studies on this, for those who are stressed out about money, for those who are worried about money, for those who are in way too much credit card debt or worried about things, there are a couple of ways it adversely affects you, probably every area of your life, but one is your health. If you live in such a way that you are stressed out about money or your credit card debt or this or that, and you're losing sleep, I want you to know what that's doing to your body is unhealthy. So if we can learn to manage our money and not let our money manage us, we will become healthier. Not only that, our relationships. If you remember last week, we looked at the top 7 reasons that people stress out. And number 1 was finances. Number 2 was our work or our careers or how we make our money. But our relationships. If you look, and on some studies, the number 1 thing that people fight about in marriage or in relationships is money. It's how much can we spend? Did we spend too much? How do we make this payment? How do we buy this? Do we need this? Do we not need? And if we can get in our relationships to a space in our lives where we manage our money and our money doesn't manage us, we will be way better off. Not only that, and you can read down and you can look at the studies, if we are in debt personally or if our money is running roughshod over us, it will affect us at the office. It'll affect us in our careers. As a matter of fact, the example that Jesus gives today in Luke chapter 16 is one such guy that because of the way he dealt with his money at home, he began to misappropriate his master's, his boss's money in such a way that it ended up costing him his job. So when we come to the idea of money, this is an important area in our lives that we have to gain control about. Now, I want you to know, if you look in God's Word, the way we deal with our money is very important. Why? Because a lot of times it tells us about our personal discipline. It tells us whether we really love God and trust God or not. And so as we come to the idea of managing our money and not letting our money manage us, I want you to know, if you look through God's Word, there are literally hundreds of verses that talk about how we should handle our money and our resources and those things that we have. If you look in the New Testament, the first 3 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, 1 out of every 6 verses deals with money or material possessions. If you go read the words of Jesus, Jesus said more about the way we handle our money or our possessions or our resources than he did about heaven or hell combined. How many of you think that's pretty important? If you look at the parables, Some half of the parables that Jesus tells have to do with money. Why? Because when we take if we want to get a good barometer on how things are going in our relationship with God and our relationship with others and at the office, oftentimes the best way to take our temperature is when we look at our finances and our resources and our money. So today, I want to encourage you with what I'm about to share with you today. I don't want you to be fearful, step back. This is not a tithe more type of sermon. This is a let's get our lives right. Just like when we talk about relationships and our job and other things, the Sabbath that we've already talked about in this series, let's get it right in our finances. Because if we can get our finances right, where we manage our finances and our finances don't manage us, we will be healthier people, our relationships will be better, and we'll have more joy at the office when we earn our money. Look at the parable in Luke chapter 16. And I want you to know as we begin to read this parable, if you aren't careful, you can misunderstand what Jesus is saying. It is the parable of the shrewd manager. And what you're going to see here in this story is there's a rich man, a wealthy man, and in every one of Jesus' parable, there is an earthly story that has a heavenly principle. Now, as you read this principle and as you read this story together, if you aren't careful, you'll begin to think, why is Jesus telling this story? Because I want you to know at first glance, when you look at this story, it doesn't sound very Jesus-y. I want you to know that. It doesn't sound like a story or a parable that Jesus would tell. As a matter of fact, a lot of teachers won't even address this passage in this parable because if you don't understand what Jesus is trying to share in this story, you think it makes Jesus look bad. But I want to tell you here in a few seconds after we read the story, the two reasons Jesus told this parable. And then we're going to look at some principles that we see from this parable on what we should not do with our money and what we should do with our money. So let's pick it up. We'll put it up on the screen. Read along with me. And hopefully you're intrigued now because this is a pretty shocking and potentially frustrating and misunderstood parable. Probably perhaps the most misunderstood parable that Jesus tells. Here's what it says. Jesus told his disciples this story. There was a rich man, and in every one of the parables he tells, there is an earthly illustration, an earthly story with heavenly principles. I want you to know when we get to the end, the rich man is God and you and I are the managers. That's what Jesus is trying to say. So how should we deal with our money? He says, there was a rich man whose manager, one of his employees, was accused of wasting his possessions. In other words, the rich man, the boss, the owner of the company, heard that one of his managers was wasting his money. Now look at verse 2. So he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management. Anybody ever have year-end reviews or financial reviews? That's exactly what has happened. He calls him in and says, give an account of your management because you cannot be a manager here so long. In other words, not only have I heard you're wasting my money, we're going to talk about how much of my money you've wasted, and then your job is no longer. I mean, there's a lot of things that have happened just in 2 verses. Then look at what it says in verse 3. The manager then said to himself, this is the employee, what now shall I do? My master has taken away my job, my career. Remember I told you a few seconds ago that if we don't manage our money and our money manages us, it could cost us our job and everything about us. He says, I'm not strong enough. Then he does a pretty honest assessment of who he is. He says, I'm not strong enough to dig holes, and I'm too ashamed to beg. Now look at verse 4. He says, I know what I'll do so that, in other words, he comes up with a plan. In other words, he comes up and devises a plan. It's not a great plan, I want you to know, but notice what he says. He says, when I lose my job here, he says, I want to come up with a plan so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So he hatches a plan. Well, what's his plan? So he called in each one of his master's debtors. In other words, the rich man, the manager called him in, called everyone who owed his master, the rich man's money. He says he called them in, each one of his master's debtors, and he asked them, how much do you owe my master? The first one said 900 gallons of olive oil. He replied, then the manager says, take your bill, sit down, quickly have it, make it 450. Then he goes to the next guy, the second one. He says, how much do you owe? He says, 1,000 bushels of wheat. He replied, he told him, then listen, sit down, take your bill, change that number. Then look at verse 8. The master commended him, the dishonest manager, because he had acted shrewdly. Now, this is where it blows our mind, right? Wait, how many of you think he just stole more money from the rich man? That's exactly what happened. But then notice what he said. He said, listen, then the rich man comes in and the master commended his dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. Now, I want you to know as you look at that verse, that tells us a little bit. First of all, what it tells us is Jesus is not praising this man's dishonesty. That is not what he is saying. But he is saying that we can learn some principles and glean some principles by what this guy just did. Now, notice what he said. He says, for the people of this world oftentimes are more shrewd in the way they deal with their money than are the people of the light. What is he saying? Jesus said, listen, not the story I've told you, but the principles I'm about to give you. Jesus says we need to understand that oftentimes that we as God's children don't do any better of a job of managing the resources that God has given us than do people of the world. And so Jesus wants us to listen in and look in and understand, man, when we think about this, this is kind of a crude story, and I want you to know it's a shocking story. But as we continue to read on, listen, Jesus is going to begin to give us principles on how we can manage our money and not let our money manage us. So let's continue to read. It says, I tell you, Jesus says, use your worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into an eternal blessing. Now, stop. That doesn't seem to get any better, right? Is Jesus basically saying, listen, you use your money to buy some friendships and perhaps buy your salvation? How many of you think that's what Jesus is saying? That is not what Jesus is saying. Oh my gosh, we're more confused. Why would Jesus say this? He says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. Verse 11, we can understand that. Verse 11, so if you have not been trustworthy in handling your worldly wealth, why should we, and let's put it this way, expect God to trust us with more and bless us with more? Who will give you property of their own? Look at verse 13. Here's another principle. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve, here's the principle, both God and money. Now look at verse 14. This kind of gives us an insight as to why Jesus would tell this story. The Pharisees who loved money heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. And look at verse 15. He said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your heart. What people value highly here on this world is detestable in the sight of God. So let me give you a couple of thoughts. First thing, if this is somewhat of a shocking story, let's start with the question, why? Why would Jesus even tell this parable? Number one, and you need to understand this, if you've got your app open, you've got your notes on, write this down. Jesus loved to shock the Pharisees. I want to preach a series, I've wanted to preach for a while, a series just simply entitled, When Jesus Dropped the Mic. Because oftentimes Jesus would be teaching his disciples a lesson, but he would teach them in such a way that the Pharisees, who loved to justify themselves, were always listening in. The number one reason that Jesus told this story was to basically shock the Pharisees and twist the knife, all right? Jesus was not telling us, let's go rip our bosses off. What he was saying is that this is exactly what the Pharisees do. Look at Luke chapter 16, verse 14. Here's what Jesus said. The Pharisees who loved money. What did the Pharisees love? They love money, they love themselves, they love their egos, they look to look good, they drove the nice cars, they live in the nice house. Man, they were addicted to upgrades. And so Jesus basically told this whole parable, number one, to drop the mic on the Pharisees. He says the Pharisees who loved money heard all of this and were sneering at Jesus. And that's exactly what Jesus wanted. Then that gave Jesus the opportunity to look at them and said, you are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others. All you care about is looking good. You want the latest fashion, the latest car, the latest trend, the latest this, the latest upgrade. He goes, you're the ones that live this way, wasting God's money. He says in the eyes, but God knows your heart. And then he says, what people value highly here on this earth are detestable in the sight of God. So the first reason Jesus told this story is basically to shock the Pharisees and expose their hard hearts. Here's the second reason Jesus told this story, this parable, even though it may shock us, is to teach those of us who are in the light or his followers about some wise money management principles. Notice what it says in verse 8. Here's what Jesus said. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are oftentimes more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. What is he saying? He's saying oftentimes those who are followers of Christ, those who are devoted of Christ, we lack the ability or the knowledge or the insight to handle the money and the resources that God has given us well. And so that's why I want to share this story with you. Regardless of what you make, whether you make a lot or whether you make a little, there are some principles that we can glean from this story that will help us make sure that we manage our money and our money doesn't manage us. Let's start with the negative. All right? There are a couple of things in here that as we read through it, there are a couple of negatives. There are a couple of thou shalt nots, a couple of things that we should not do with our money. Number one is don't waste it. All right? Don't waste your money. Don't waste God's money. Don't waste it on things that we don't need. Our money is not an unlimited resource. We want to utilize our money and use our money in such a way that we want to spend it in a way or invest it in a way that we invest it and spend it on things that really matter. Look at Luke chapter 16, verse 1. Here's what Jesus said. Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. Now, remember the story. The rich man is analogous with God. We are the managers. Let me ask you a question. If God called you in right now, or if God called me in right now and said, John Mark, give an account of the resources that I have given you, would God find that I'm wasting my resources? Or would God find that I am spending them and investing them on things that matter? Would God find that my money is managing me or that I am managing my money? And that's a good question for all of us. And if you look back to this passage, it says Jesus told his disciples there was a rich man, God, who was accused of, who had a manager who was accused of wasting his money. That would be me. So he called him in and asked for him, says, what is this I hear? Give an account of your management because you cannot be a manager anymore. Let me ask you a question. Remember, if we can get this area of our life, so many other areas of our lives will fall in place. What are you wasting money on right now? What memberships do you pay for every month that you don't utilize or use? Anybody have any? I know some of the ladies are sitting here looking, it's deer hunting season, and my husband's on this deer hunting lease, and he buys all these guns, and he's got these feeders and this corn. How many? Oh, ladies, your husband's not here with you, right? Ladies, you got any subscriptions that you're spending money on every month that you don't use? Guess what? That's wasting money, right? Are there memberships or things that we just spend our money on every month that's a waste? If you perhaps, and I'm raising my hand, if you perhaps at least have one of those in your life that you know about, raise your hand. That's all of us. So don't waste your money. Here's the second thing that Jesus says don't do. He says, man, don't trust your money for security or satisfaction. Why? Because you never know when it's going to be gone. We never know. Remember 2008? How many of you remember the market crash? How many remember all the layoffs? How many of you remember this? How many of you remember that? Man, don't ever trust your money or security. I prayed with the man after this first service as we were talking about, man, this year he lost his job. We have other people in our church who, boy, they didn't see it coming. All of a sudden they were downsized or their company right-sized and left them out. Anybody in here, you've had a change of plans in your life. We better be prepared. And if we've been wasting our money and not investing it or spending it wisely, we could get caught in a big place and a big season of trouble financially. Look at what Jesus said as you think about this. Don't trust your money for security or satisfaction. Look at verse 3. It says, the manager said to himself, what shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. In other words, it's going away. Master is taking away my job, for they will surely sprout wings and fly. I jumped to the next verse. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm not ashamed. Look at Proverbs chapter 23, verse 5. Put it up there. He says, cast but a glance upon riches, and they are gone, for they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. Whatever you and I do, we can't look at our nest egg or our money, our trust, or whatever we do. We can't look to that to provide safety and security for us. Why? Because they'll go away. He says, if you and I think that our money or our finances or our investments are our ultimate source of security, he says, it's not that way. He says, none of us get to take whatever we have with us. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Everything I have at the end of my physical road will be left to someone else. I can't take it with me. Look at what Solomon said in Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 10. He says, whoever loves money will never have enough. And whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. If that's what you love, and if that's what you long for, it'll never satisfy you. Money simply can't do that. Here's the third thing that Jesus says don't do. He says, whatever you do when it comes to your money, don't love it and don't live for it. Whatever you do, don't love your money and don't live your life for it. Why? Because if you live for more money, you'll compromise your character, your integrity, your relationships, everything about who you are. Why? So you can gain another dollar, you can make another buck. Notice Jesus says this as we look right in there. If we think about it, look at verse 13. He says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. He says you cannot serve both God and money. See, Jesus takes this story that we think is a bit frustrating, that we think is a bit confusing, that we have a tendency to misunderstand, and he takes and turns it and gives us some amazingly good lessons about money. If you love money, it will stand between you and you loving God. If my eyes are constantly drawn to loving money, Jesus said no one can serve two masters. It can't be done. He says, now, if I love my money, I can't serve God, but if I can love God, then I can use my money to serve others. It does flow that way. That's what the Apostle Paul said in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10. We'll put it up on the screen. He says, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Let me just make sure we're all clear in here. Because this is one of the verses that I hear misquoted about as much as any. Does that verse say money is the root of all evil? What does it say is the root of all kinds of evil? The love of money. If I am willing to sell my life and sell my integrity and sell my career and sell my relationships and sell my friendships, if I am willing to do all of those things because I love money, guess what's going to happen? Notice what he says. He says, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered away from the faith, and notice what happened. Have pierced themselves with many griefs. That's the point of the parable. That if we love money more than we love anything else, we should be careful. Over in Luke chapter 12, verse 15, here's another way Jesus put it. Jesus said to them, he says, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Why? Because life does not exist in the abundance of possessions. So those are some things we shouldn't do. Let me give you some things that we should do. All right? Came straight from this passage. Thought number one is this. We have to always remember that it all belongs to God. The point of the passage is everything belongs to God. We are just managers. Guess what? I get to manage my little financial kingdom. You get to manage your little financial kingdom. Someone else gets to manage their financial kingdom. Now, granted, when we look around on this earth, how many of you have noticed some people's financial kingdom's a little bigger than others, right? Some of you have a really, really big financial kingdom. Some of us have a really small financial kingdom. Either way, I want you to know the size of the kingdom doesn't matter. It's do we manage what we have well? Do I manage my money well, or does my money manage me? It all belongs to God. That's why in verse 1, Jesus, remember, it's a heavenly story. It's an earthly story with a heavenly illustration. He says, Jesus told his disciples this story where there was a rich man, that's God, whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. It all comes from God. If I go home today and because my throat is a little parched and I'm struggling with allergies like many of you are, if I walk over and I open up my cabinet and I grab a glass out and I walk over to my refrigerator, and in my refrigerator it's got this little spot where you can stick your cup in. How many of you have one of those? You can get water out of the refrigerator. Let me ask you a question. How many of you think that the refrigerator is the source of that water? It's not the source of that water. What's the source of that water? You say those lines that lead outside to the water main in front of my house. How many of you think the water main's the source of that water? No, it goes all the way back to the municipal district where they clean the water, right? And they pump it up into these tanks which force it into my house. Well, how many of you think those tanks are the source of the water? No, those tanks aren't the source of the water because they go all the way back to some lake, right? How many of you think the lake is the source of the water? It's not the source of the water because there are rivers that feed the lake. How many of you understand that? But it's not the river that's the source of the water, it's the rain, right? No, it's not the rain because the rain comes from what? Those dark clouds. So the clouds are the source of the water, right? Wait, no, the clouds aren't the source of the water because they are just a product of an atmosphere that has water in it. They just collect it and give it to us. Wait, who created our world and everything in it? In the beginning, God. So when I stand at my refrigerator this afternoon with my cup, who's the source of all water? God. It's the same when I'm sitting there writing a check or I'm putting my credit card in, my ATM. I need to understand the source is always God. That's what Jesus wants to remind us. The rich man called the manager in. We're just managing some of God's resources. That's point number one. Point number two is this. If I want to make sure that I manage my money doesn't manage me, I need a budget, a plan, and a willingness to change the budget and the plan. How many of you understand what I'm talking about? I need a plan and a budget and a plan, and then a willingness to change the plan, right? If I am an investor, if I'm investing for my retirement, as I get closer and closer to retirement, what do I need to do with my money? I need to become more and more conservative the way I invest it. So if all of a sudden another 2008 happens, a market crash happens, I don't lose my retirement nest egg. Why? Because I no longer have 30 years to regain it. It's the same way in our life. As I just look out for the year, I have a plan and a budget, but I have to also have a willingness to change the plan and the budget. Just like the man who talked to me out in the atrium after the first service. He lost his job in the middle of this year. Guess what they had better do? They had better change the budget and plan. How many of you understand what I'm talking about? There are things that happen in our life that plans change and budgets change. We almost had one of those in our family this week. How many of y'all are familiar with my wife's dog, Rex? Every night, or at least most every night, because Rex, these Great Danes, they're awesome. They love to lay around. They sleep most of the day. And so Gina and I, a lot of times at night, sometimes at 8:45, 9 o'clock or something, we'll take it out for a short walk. And here's our typical pattern of what we do when we take it out for a walk, is we walk down to the end of our cul-de-sac and then over the road, and there's an elementary school right there, and just as we walk across that road, there's a berm where you walk over. Why? Because right there next to the elementary school is this large field where the kids play on. Why is the berm there? So the balls don't roll out in the street for the elementary school. How many of you understand what I'm talking about? So here's always our plan, is we walk this dog down on the collar, we walk him over the street, up over that berm, and we say sit. And he sits there. And he is ready to go. And then we let him go, and he takes off. And he looks so amazingly majestic, like a black stallion flying across all the way to the other end of that recess field. And then what will happen, he'll stop and turn around, and then he comes flying back straight at us. And at that point, your prayer life increases. Oh, Lord, don't let him hit me. This 135-pound Great Dane. And then what will happen is usually come right by us, and he'll turn around and he'll run off. And he'll do that about 3 minutes, and then you can hook him back up and he'll sleep for 8 hours. That's pretty much how our walks go. Monday night was different. Monday night, and let me just tell you, as I tell you this story, everyone's okay, except for the car. We do exactly what we did. Gene and I walk him down. We walk him over the berm. We say, sit. I let him go, and he just takes off. And he looks, and you can hear him coming before you can see him coming, because he's all black. And we take him over there at night, make sure no one's out there. You see him kind of milling around, and all of a sudden he comes straight back at us. And as he's coming straight back at us, he runs right by us. You just kind of stand there, Lord, don't let him hit me. And then he runs right by us, and we turn and look, and he's heading back to the house at full speed. All we can do is see him go up over the berm, and about that time, you see the top of a car coming. And you're saying, oh, Lord. And the next thing you hear is, bam! Gina loves this dog. And next thing I know is I feel her, she is here, she drops. And I know that's my signal. I need to go over this berm and see how this dog is doing. This guy in the car, he pulls over to the side. I'll go over. About the time I come over the berm, Rex is kind of standing in the middle of that front lane. Anybody ever seen a baby giraffe that is just born and they've got that leg thing right there? He is stung, all right? And you're like, okay, he's up. And so as I run over to him, Gina's over there, and she goes, is he okay? I said, I really don't know. I lean down, get down on my knee, and I can feel blood coming out of his chest. I mean, he has nailed this car at full speed. I walk him back over, and this guy's gotten out of the vehicle, and I put him over on the side, and Gina has come over, and she says, all right. I said, we'll take him to the vet and make sure he's okay. He's bleeding. I go over and talk to this man and say, hey, listen, I live right there. My wife loves this dog. I will not rip you off. There it is. So let me call you. Let's exchange information. He goes, I know you. And I'm like, God dang. If we visited your church. I'm like, okay, so you know where to get me, all right? And so we slowly begin to nurse this dog back to the house, all right? It's clearly, I will just tell you this, that we immediately, had he been in a football game, for those of you guys here, he would have been ejected for targeting, I want you to know. I walk around to this guy's car, and I'm like, did he do any damage to the car? And we look back on the back, and you can see my dog's head print in the rear back door. Our dog hit this car that was moving in the back door. Then clearly his body flopped up against the back quarter panel. And then as he turns, he rips the rubber bumper off the back. That's why he was standing there like this. So we walk him over there, and he's bleeding. I mean, it's kind of one of those things that I go and get her vehicle, and we pull it around. We lay the seats down, and I'm like, wait, and I go get a blanket. We throw it down, and about this time, Jace has come up, and he likes this dog along with Gina, and so we get it up, we lay it in the back, and we begin to drive because she is now, as we're walking on, she's called. She knows there's these thing called dog ER. Frisco. How many of you know animal ERs? How many of you have been to one of these things? Okay. That's my first experience. So as we're going there, but I have heard the horror stories about the financial aspect. I see some of you going, oh yeah. And so as we're driving there, Jace goes ahead and gets in the back. I'm driving. Gina and I are not talking. We're both praying. And we are not talking because she knows what I'm thinking, and I know what she's thinking. She's praying, Lord, let the dog be okay. I'm praying, Lord, please don't let this be expensive. So we've coexisted long enough. We know this is not the time for the conversation. So we're just rolling down there, and she's like, how much, do you think it's got? I got no idea. It doesn't matter, babe. All those kind of things. And just rolling down. Now, she's got this '07 Infiniti, and now that we've had kids graduate, we started talking about getting her a new car. And for us, new car means getting her one in this decade. Okay, that's what it means. And we've actually looked at a couple and thinking about it. And so this is when you know you've raised your son right. When we're driving to this ER and your son from the back says, Mom, there goes your new car. And you're going, yes, that's my boy. Because that was rolling through my mind, but I was smart enough not to say it. Gina, God bless her soul, she responds, I know. Got to have a budget and a plan and a willingness to change the plan. Guess what she was willing to do for that dog? Change the plan. Does that make sense? And change the budget. Now, good news is, she's called ahead. We're going to this Frisco ER. I've never had this experience before. She's the dog owner. I'm a dog. She's the dog lover. I'm the dog owner. And so she's told them we're coming, and I'm not kidding you. We pull up to the Frisco ER, and two guys come out with a gurney. Did you know they had such a thing? And Jason and I get out of the car, and I look at him, and I go, that dog ain't going on that gurney. All right, so Jason and I get in there, we lift the dog up, walk him in. They immediately walk us in. They take the dog in the back, all right, and we're in an ER. And about 15 minutes later, we're sitting there, and we're nervous. I mean, he hit hard, okay? He hit hard. And we're nervous, and then the technician comes out and says, listen, the doctor is in the middle of emergency surgery on another animal. He did break away, come over. All of your dog's vitals are fine. It doesn't seem to be critical. We'll see if there's anything. He is bleeding. We're going to have to see later if there's anything broken or whatever. We'll worry about that later. And he goes, it's going to be about 2.5 or 3 hours before the doctor sees the dog. In my mind, that dog's healed. 2.5, 3 hours, I heard everything I need. It's not critical. His vitals are fine. All right, I got Band-Aids at the house. So I look and I said, listen, can we just take the dog? He goes, man, you don't want to take the dog. I said, we're not staying here 2.5 or 3 hours. We'd take the dog. And so I look over at the lady on the front door. I say, how much is the bill right now? She goes, well, it's $168 just for showing up. And I go, print that out, I'll pay it. Then, so the technician goes back, talks to the doctor. The doctor comes out. He says the doctor would like to give him a sedative and a painkiller. Now, even I know the dog needs a painkiller, okay? I said, all right, give it to him. Come back out, $198. I'm out of there. I'm way better than y'all. How many of you know what I'm talking? Y'all are jealous? So we take the dog home. I told Gina, give it a call in the morning. So in the morning, we take it to our vet, but not at the ER rates. And sure enough, no broken bones, lots of bruises, just cuts, get him sewed up. Now, there's another aspect of this story. When you pick up your insurance agent and you've seen the car and you call your insurance agent in the morning and say, listen, my dog ran into a car. And he goes, what? And I said, my dog ran into a car. And he says, a moving car or a parked car? And I go, it was moving. And he goes, where did he hit it? I go, in the back door. He goes, yeah, here's your claim number. Call this claim. So you go and call, and I want you to know, if you call to claim, there is no option for your dog T-bones a car. Is this a home related? Is this auto related? Is this theft? Is this water? Is this fire? Is this a pre-existing claim? Is this medical? Did it happen at the office? Option 9, all other. So you pick up the phone. So you've my insurance agent, he's shocked. Then you talk to someone, all they're doing is starting the claim. And they say, well, tell us about the claim. Well, my wife and I went out and walked the dog. We let the dog out, and he ran into the side of the car. He goes, do what? Yeah, my dog ran into the side of the. He goes, where did it hit it? And I said, in the back. He goes, like, back what? And I said, back door. Was there much damage? I go, well, define much. So he goes, okay, I got the claim. He goes, your claims agent's going to be so-and-so, and they're going to call you, and then they're going to record you. So somewhere out there is a recording of me saying, this is John Mark Caton. I live at 2001 Covey Glen. Last night, my wife and I walked the dog and let it go, and it ran into the side of a door of a moving car, and the back door, the rear quarter panel, and the bumper are all affected. And it's our fault. And what am I thinking at this point? How much is this going to cost me? How much is this going to cost me? What do we need to know? I need a plan and a budget, and I need a willingness to change the plan. Good news is Stitches got him. The dog is still in concussion protocol. But we think he's going to be okay. So now I need a plan, I need a budget, I need a willingness to change the plan. Look at what it says as we look at it, verse 3. He says, the manager said to himself, what shall I do now? For us, that needs to be our question. If we have been overspending our income, if credit card debt has been going up, we've been paying interest on credit cards, what do I need to do? I need to ask that question right now. What should I do right now? I need to change the budget. I need to change the plan. My master is taking away everything. In other words, I don't have enough. I'm not strong enough to dig holes, and I'm too ashamed to beg. He goes, I know what I'll do. I'll come up with a different plan. You and I need to understand. We have to change the plan and the budget sometimes. I love what Proverbs chapter 14, verse 8 says. It says, the wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to their ways. If you keep handling your money the way you're handling it right now, are you going to dig a deeper hole? Or are you going to grow bigger investments? See, we have to get thought to our ways, right? I need a budget, I need a plan, and I need a willingness to change the plan. I want to encourage you to go ask yourself the question, what should we do now? When we look back over the last 3 months, 6 months, year, do I need to change the plan? Here's number 3, what Jesus says we should do. We have to always remember that someday I'll give an account to God for everything I have spent. And I don't want God to call me in and say, John Mark, you wasted what I gave you. Look at what it says in Luke chapter 16, verse 2. So he called him in and asked him, this is what I hear about you. Give an account of your management. God is going to someday call us all in and ask us to give account for our management. Here's number 4 that Jesus tells us right here. Money is best used to get others into heaven. Now, this confuses people. Because when I read this verse again, and you've already heard it once, some of you might think, see, I can buy my way into heaven. That's not what Jesus is saying. Some of you think it seems kind of shady what Jesus is saying. What Jesus is essentially saying in this passage is what? Look at verse 9. He says, I tell you that you should use your worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself, so that when it is gone, they will welcome you into your eternal dwelling. Shocking, Jesus is not saying we can buy our way into heaven. What Jesus is saying is when I die, I can't take a dime with me. But what I can do if I have spent my resources to get others into heaven, that when I get to heaven, I will have eternal relationships that will last way beyond my earthly money. That's exactly what Jesus is saying. That you and I need to give and go and be a part of missions and the work of God and fall festivals and mission trips and all of these things. Why? Because our money is not going to last anyway, but the eternity that we will spend in heaven with those we bring to faith matters forever. Here's number 5, and this is what we're going to close. If I am faithful with the little, God can trust me with much more. If I'm faithful with the little that God gives us, God can trust me so much more. As our team begins to come out and they settle up and get ready for us to sing our last song, let me read these verses to you. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. As we think about the goodness of God that we sang about early, and the song we're about to sing, Raise the Hallelujah, is our closing anthem today as a congregation of believers. Let me ask you a question. If you think what you've been asked to manage now is too little, and you're asking God to bless you more, let me ask you a question. Have you been faithful with the little? Have you been a good steward of what God has given you? Or do you need to change the plan? Do you need a new budget? Because someday God's going to call us all in. And He's going to say, John Mark, what did you do with the resources I gave you? What did you do with the money I gave you? What did you do with the talents I gave you? And I believe every person in this room wants to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things, I'll put you in charge of much. Everyone in this room, whether you're a follower of Christ yet or not, we need to remember that Jesus says you need to learn how to manage your money. Because if you don't, the way you use your money could destroy your life. Let's pray and then we'll sing. Father, thank you so much for this day. God, as we come to the end of the service on money, I pray that there are some here, their relationships are stressed out, they're losing sleep, they're anxious about finances, that they would leave here and take these principles and get those things in the right order so that the relationships again would be sweet, the careers would be unfettered by a need for always more money, and their health would get better. God, as we raise the hallelujah, we remember that you are good. So good. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen and amen.